Today, the United States marks 24 years since the September 11th attacks, a day that indeed changed the course of history. Nearly 3,000 people were killed when hijacked planes struck New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. Baraka Agberemi looks back at what happened and the legacy it left behind.
On September 11, 2001, the United States of America came under attack. 4 passenger planes were hijacked and turned into weapons. 2 of them struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York, 17 minutes apart. Within hours, both 110-story buildings collapsed, covering the city in smoke and dust. A 3rd plane slammed into the Pentagon, the head of the U.S. military just outside Washington. The 4th crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers tried to overpower the hijackers. Investigators believe its target was the U.S. Capitol. In all, 2,977 persons were killed, including 441 first responders. Victims ranged from a 2-year-old girl to an 82-year-old man. Citizens of 77 countries were among the dead.
We need to humanize what happened those 24 years ago.
The attackers belonged to Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. The group claimed it was acting against U.S. influence in the Muslim world. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, believed to be the mastermind, has been held in Guantanamo Bay since 2006. His trial has dragged on for years, with no clear resolution in sight. The attacks triggered America's longest war. U.S. troops invaded Afghanistan less than a month later. Bin Laden himself was killed in Pakistan 10 years after 9/11.
We quickly learned that the 9/11 attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda, an organization headed by Osama bin Laden, which had openly declared war on the United States and was committed to killing innocents in our country and around the globe. And so we went to war against Al-Qaeda to protect our citizens, our friends, and our allies. Over the last 10 years, thanks to the tireless and heroic work of our military and our counterterrorism professionals, we've made great strides in that effort. We've disrupted terrorist attacks and strengthened our homeland defense. In Afghanistan, we removed the Taliban government, which had given bin Laden and al-Qaeda safe haven and support. And around the globe, we worked with our friends and allies to capture or kill scores of al-Qaeda terrorists, including several who were a part of the 9/11 plot.
The legacy of that day still felt. Flight security was overhauled worldwide. The cleanup of Ground Zero lasted 8 months. In its place, the One World Center now rises higher than the original towers. For survivors and families, the pain never fades. Each year, Americans pause to remember the lives lost and the day that reshaped a nation. 24 years on, the attacks of September 11 remain a defining moment in U.S. history and a reminder of both tragedy and resilience. Baraka Agberemi, TVC News.
Joining me now to discuss this is the G Center of Advanced and Professional Studies, Professor Anthony Kila. Prof, thank you for joining us on the news this hour. This story, on a light note, reminds us how old we are all getting. I mean, the 9/11 incident is now 24 years, and almost 3 decades after, it does seem that the face of terrorism has changed significantly, from foreign terror networks like Al-Qaeda to domestic violent extremism in the U.S., often linked to lone actors radicalized online. How do you see this evolution, and does it suggest that America's greatest threat today is no longer foreign but homegrown?
Well, I think it would be wrong to try to isolate any part of the threat. Good to be here, by the way, and you're right, we're all a bit older, some of us grayer than some of you, but we're all here. You're still slick looking. I think we must understand, as I was saying, that it's very dangerous these days to try to isolate any form of terror, indeed, any form of human factor. This globalized world, this digitalized world is a real thing. And whatever happens in one part of the world affects all of us. For 9/11 itself, I have written elsewhere that it is what has shaped, and many people forget it, it is what has shaped the new world we live in. It has affected us as a society. It has affected us politically, economically, and in terms of global politics and alliance as well. Just as the alliances of the world has shifted, so as terror has shifted in their strategies, in their alliance, and the way they appear. So to that point, you're right in noticing that whilst the war on terror, as it then became, don't forget, I want our viewers to remember that this expression war on terror was coined after 9/11. The idea that terrorists are outsiders was something that was high post 9/11, but after that, it is now clear that terrorists can be within as well, and those have a lot of consequences. So to that point, your premise is fascinating.
Indeed.
And is worthy of note.
Just yesterday, we reported the assassination of political commentator Charlie Kirk, again reigniting debate about gun control. How much has America's gun control complicated this fight against violent extremism?
Well, I think a lot. You see, part of what came out from 9/11 is that because of the drama, the sheer drama in which faction and fiction were almost blood, used blood together. You see, the attack on the Trade Center, on the Pentagon, it provided a political, legal, and sociological justification to curtail freedom because of security. It gave the idea that we must fight back. It justified the mentality that we must fight back. But there are two lessons to learn from it. One, let us not brush everything. By the way, in the middle of we must fight back, there are individual victims in which people, because of their religion or because of the way they look, became suspicious, especially for some of us who are living in the West in that period of time, between the UK and the US. And in Europe, I was able to see firsthand how looking in a certain way or praying in a certain way became an albatross before you even did anything, just because you looked that way. But we must also say, in the middle of that there's a fascinating human paradox. That fear led to exclusion, but it also led some individuals towards inclusion. There were vigils of different religions, there were memorials, there were prayers, and there were people who are open to each other. And that is a lesson to take away from it, depending on how we interpret it. But you're right, a part of the world has interpreted it as we must use terror to fight terror. And that has justified series of interventions, including the invasion and the war in Afghanistan, the Taliban issue, and other fights like that. And at home, the idea became we need to arm ourselves. But there's another lesson that needs to be taken from all this is that it is clear that guns cannot fight guns.
Indeed.
It is idea, education, civility, and humanity that can fight violence.
Absolutely.
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying the state should not fight. What I'm saying is that the idea of barbarism against barbarism, terror against terror is not the answer.
Indeed.
That is a lesson to learn, because the relax of gun control and the return, you just showed President Barack Obama, the expression of people clinging to their gun has not solved any problem. It has not saved anything. Even the battles that were won turned out to be lost wars. I refer to the Taliban, for example,
Indeed.
and I refer to the increase in violence and gun in America.
Good place to leave it. We'll probably find some more time to explore this further. America has spent trillions on counterterrorism since 2001, yet the threats continue in different forms. Hopefully Nigeria and indeed the African continent has a lot of lessons to learn from there. Professor Anthony Kila, it's good to see you again.
Thank you very much for having me.